Community Heart Media. Your voice, your heart, your opportunity. Welcome to tonight's show.
Well, here we are on Community Heart Radio, live to you on your Facebook and through Tuned In and through 98.9 Northwest FM. It's great to have you all here tonight. And Kelly, wow, what a night we've got, hey? Big topic tonight. Do you want to introduce the topic to us?
Yeah, I know. And thank you, Mark. And I'd just like to introduce everyone, Lisa, Tracy and Graham. So it's part of Epilepsy Awareness Month. And so we're going to be speaking about each of their journeys and their roles, and then also a little about my own personal experience as well.
Well, Kelly, it's a very interesting topic, and I don't know whether a lot of people know about it. So tonight, sit back because you're going to learn an awful lot about epilepsy and hear some personal stories. It's just going to be fantastic tonight. Don't forget, on 98.9 Northwest FM, and tonight we want to make it as interactive as we can. So please put your comments in the chat on the 98.9 Northwest FM Facebook page or the Community Heart Facebook page, and I'm sure our amazing panel of people will love to answer the questions. Well, look, we might start with Lisa. Lisa, do you want to maybe introduce yourself?
Okay, well, I've been working for the Epilepsy Foundation for 33 years. I'm an epilepsy support worker. The roles changed quite a bit over the years. I used to be based in Bendigo for many, many years and did quite a lot of regional work, so there was a lot of outreach. But really, I have, as part of the epilepsy support worker team, I'm privileged to actually meet and have contact with lots of families, primarily these days by telephone, via Zoom, particularly under the sort of COVID year or two of restrictions. It's been fairly difficult to do home visits, although we are starting to do that now. So really, we go with people along their journey, regardless of where they are at that journey. So we have contact and support a lot of people who are going through the process of being diagnosed, because epilepsy is often confused or misdiagnosed for other conditions. Then we support people who've had a confirmation of an epilepsy diagnosis, and that might be parents. We frequently get parents sort of contacting our service for support, or it might be an adolescent or an adult. And then we often support people who really, that 30% of people who live with chronic, what we call drug-resistant epilepsy. So it's very diverse, and we really try to take a very person-centred approach to the service we provide.
Well, it's fantastic to have you here, Lisa, and a lot of years in the field, a lot of experience. So we're looking forward to hearing that. Tracy, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe give us a definition of what epilepsy is?
Exactly.
Epilepsy is a seizure disorder, and it covers a whole range of seizure disorders. So to many people, epilepsy means many things. So there's not any one type of epilepsy, and it manifests itself in all sorts of different physical symptoms. So my involvement with epilepsy was when my son Hamish, who's now 26, was diagnosed at the age of 13. And upon his diagnosis, when I really went into pretty much a grieving process, and during that process, I reached out to the Epilepsy Foundation, and I've been involved with them ever since as a family. My daughter's been an ambassador for the Epilepsy Foundation. My husband's on the board of directors. I've just been working with them on a feasibility study. So we
That's
felt
fantastic.
like the only way to really, getting involved with the foundation was our way of coping with epilepsy. Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you on the show, and looking forward to hearing more of your story as we go through. And Graham, nice to have you on the show.
Nice to be here, Mark.
Tell us a bit about yourself. Where do you fit into the epilepsy cause, if we like to call it?
I have the real privilege of being the CEO of the Epilepsy Foundation, and that's a role I've held for 15 years now. I'm also involved at the international level. I'm the treasurer of the International Bureau for Epilepsy. So I've I've really enjoyed my time working at the Epilepsy Foundation, and I do have a personal connection. Not that I knew it when I started the role, but within about 6 months of me taking the role on, my older brother disclosed that he had epilepsy, and
Wow.
it was one of the disclosures that made me realise how much of a problem epilepsy is for people, when even within a family they won't disclose it because of the fear of the stigma. So that certainly heightened my desire to really increase the awareness and understanding of epilepsy right throughout Australia. It's such a disabling condition when people don't feel like or trust that they can disclose their epilepsy without feeling they'll be unfairly treated or discriminated against, and so that's one of the major issues we try and deal with.
And Graham, from where you sit, what would be the number one challenge facing people with epilepsy today?
Well, I think not being understood is the number one challenge. I think it's and not being accepted for who they are. I think for about 1/3 of people that get an epilepsy diagnosis, they don't get seizure control through medical intervention, and their lives can be really impacted by not knowing when they're going to have a seizure, and also the impacts of seizure in terms of injury, accidents, injury, and risks of death. I think a lot of people don't realise that over 300 people die as a result of their epilepsy each year in Australia.
Wow.
For people that don't have seizure control, there's often a lot of impacts on their ability to work or not, to drive or not. So there's fears about going out on public transport in case they have a seizure and put themselves at risk.
So Graham, what's the stats with that when you say 300 people? I mean, that's a lot. We hear all these COVID figures out there, and obviously this is Epilepsy Awareness Month. So, and in terms of uncontrolled, how many are those per year or across Australasia?
Yeah, so there's 300 deaths a year in Australia. About half are as a result of an accident caused by the seizure. So, falling off something, crashing your car, injuring yourself in a workplace, or drowning. And about 45% are SUDEP, which is a sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, where people are found dead in their bed in the morning, often by their family, and that's an extremely traumatic event for the families. And the other 5% are what's called status epilepticus, where people just have a seizure that doesn't stop.
Wow.
So, that's the really severe end. And, I'd encourage anyone who's listening with epilepsy, do talk to your physician, because there are certain types of epilepsies where you're at more risk, and there's other types where the risk is minimal, and we don't want everybody being unnecessarily concerned, but your treating physician should be able to tell you whether the type of epilepsy you or your family member has puts you at risk. And I think it's important then to understand that, and you can work with the Epilepsy Foundation and support workers like Lisa, who can help you manage the risks and put a management plan together, and really understand the particular epilepsy that you have and the particular risks associated, and the strategies you can take to really minimise risks.
So Lisa, you must have, so you said 33 years earlier, started off in Bendigo. Talk us through your experience as a support worker and how it's changed and what you're currently doing at the moment and some of your experiences.
Well, there has been a shift over the years to less sort of face-to-face and more sort of telephone-based, internet-based, Zoom-based support. And that's partly because the demand for the service has grown. And we have a real commitment to ensure that people, no matter where they live, get equitable access to supports. But look, honestly, no day ever is exactly the same. A lot of, a core part of our job is to ensure people go to the doctor. It's often parents. They may or may not get a chance to ask all the questions they want to ask, or they may feel uncomfortable about raising certain questions with the diagnosing and treating doctor. So they'll come to us. So part of our role is to try and help them understand that their particular child's epilepsy syndrome or the adolescent syndrome or the adult syndrome, to try and help answer their questions, to try and put them in. One of the themes for parents often is a real reluctance for their children to go on anti-seizure medication. They're very focused on the potential harm or side effects, but they often underestimate the risk from having seizures, particularly seizures like tonic clonic seizures. So we try and help them have a balanced discussion. And we have contact with parents, for example, who once a child's diagnosed want to wrap their child in cotton wool and be very, very overprotective. And we know really from psychological health that that's not the best approach. So we have to provide a lot of support and guidance often to parents to help them understand that quality of life is really important and to help them understand how they can minimise risk. So the role is incredibly diverse. A fairly significant part revolves around doing epilepsy management plans for a range of settings, for schools, for example, so that all the key people in a school understand that particular child's unique epilepsy circumstances. What do their seizures look like? What are their triggers? What's the appropriate immediate first aid support for that child? When does it become an emergency and you need to call an ambulance? And quite a lot of people now, particularly children, get prescribed an emergency medication, usually midazolam, that's really commonly used in the community now, and that's proven to be very effective at stopping prolonged seizures or clusters of seizures. Because once a seizure goes longer, particularly a tonic-clonic seizure, longer than 5 minutes, it's incredibly risky. So we have nurse educators on staff who do training at a range of settings so that that person with epilepsy, no matter what age, is included in the full gamut of what people want to do in life. That's a big focus of our role, is to get people to understand it's important to take an inclusive approach rather than the reverse and thinking, no, that person can't do that. It's how can we make sure it's safe for someone to participate in whatever's on offer at the school, for example.
So, Lisa, for those people who don't know what a seizure looks like and the signs to look out for, what do you often educate, those, who have had a first seizure or sort of finding out what's going on? What advice do you give?
Well, it really does depend on the individual circumstances. So, and in a good management plan, you really want good descriptions of the seizures. It's not so important to have seizure terminology. So really you need to understand what type of seizures is that particular person having, to be able to sort of provide education for them, their extended family, their friendship group, key organisations like kindergarten, schools, universities, workplaces, for example. So it really does depend on what's that person's epilepsy diagnosis. And as much as possible, neurologists, paediatric neurologists, paediatricians try to diagnose what's called an epilepsy syndrome when someone starts having seizures and an epilepsy diagnosis is made. And then you can talk about, well, what's the prognosis for that person with that particular type of epilepsy syndrome? Is it likely to resolve? What's caused that syndrome? Do they have an underlying brain injury, or for example, and are they likely to have a lifelong epilepsy? Have they got a genetic type of epilepsy? So it really varies enormously.
Well, look, Julio, a lot of our listeners know Julio is not in the studio at the moment, but he is in the back room. So we've had Milton come in and he's one of Kelly's fans, of course. He says, great questions, Kelly. So his fan club's continuing there, Kelly. So if you've got any other comments or questions, it looks like our friend Julio working in the back room is working very well. So we'd love to have your comments or questions coming up. We've got an amazing panel here that know everything there is to know about epilepsy. So now's your chance. And I was talking to someone before the show. They were going to listen in because they wanted to learn. And there's no doubt we're going to learn tonight a lot about the subject. And Tracy, look, I suppose, you're very dedicated to the foundation. I'm sure Graham, as the CEO, loves your involvement, and your husband being the chair of the board. So, he'll be watching what he says tonight. But can you run us through the challenges a family has when one of their children is diagnosed with epilepsy? How did it go for you guys? And just give us a bit of an insight into the journey.
So as I alluded to before, thanks, Mark, I think the first thing, it is kind of like a grieving process. It's like, my perfectly healthy, amazing son, because that's what every mum thinks. Like, no, he can't have epilepsy. And I think for me, it was worse because I had a background as an intensive care nurse. So sometimes the more you know, the worse it is. I just imagined, the future being really bleak, which is common, when you first get the diagnosis. And as we went through the journey, it was really a journey for the whole family. A classic example at one stage, when my daughter is only 2 years younger than my son, and she said, "Mum, I really seriously wish I had epilepsy because then I would get all the attention." And I think that we forget that that's the impact. And for my husband and I, we were lucky that it drew us together, but that's not always the case. I couldn't go anywhere without a phone being on. I would, if Hamish was, in bed at night, I would sleep very poorly. The slightest noise would make me in case he was having a seizure. So all of those kind of things really impact on a family. And of course, as Hamish went through his teenage years, it was really tough for him, the acceptance, his peers. He had an amazing group of friends, but what I did from the outset is once I got over the initial shock and had the support of the Epilepsy Foundation, I thought, okay, my role for a young boy, a 13-year-old boy, is to become his advocate. And I worked so hard with his school, with his sporting groups, that he was not excluded from a single thing. When I first went to his school and I said, Hamish has epilepsy, they said, we've never had a child with epilepsy at this school.
Wow.
Now, statistically, that's impossible. And as I became more and more of an advocate, and Hamish actually went away, he was actually at boarding school. So it created another layer of maybe complication, although the only time I slept at night was when he was at school and he was in a room full of other boys and someone else was listening out for him. But when he was away at school and I got the Epilepsy Foundation involved, all of a sudden the school said to me, "Oh, Tracy, can you get them back this year? We've got 5 kids. Can you get them back next year? We've got 6 kids." So it opened up the dialogue. And his friends now who he grew up with, it is so much a natural part of their, I get the call, Tracy, Hamo's had a seizure, he's fine, we've timed it, he's waking up, he hasn't hurt himself. It's amazing.
Wow. Well, look, Kelly, we've got a bit of competition going because Mike Bax reckons that I'm not too bad either, which is fantastic. So we've got a bit of competition flying here on 98.9. But we do want your questions. Your comments are great, but questions would even be better. But look, as a parent, what sort of support did you need? Now, look, it sounds like you're in a privileged position, but not everyone's got a partner. Not everyone can handle it that well. What are some of the support needs that you need dealing with this?
I think that, I would say first up the Epilepsy Foundation, but it's Epilepsy Foundation in conjunction with, I think, you can have your specialist, but I think a trusted GP that you can go to on a more regular basis and have discussions about your concerns, and maybe just not about the health of the child with epilepsy, but your own health, your own mental health,
Yes.
your own physical health, the toll that it's taking on you. So I think that's really, really important. And I think arming yourself with information, understanding, knowing, maybe connecting with other people who have children with epilepsy or who have had epilepsy themselves. The more you connect, the more you talk, the more open you are about it. We have never, we were very fortunate that it was front and center for us. It was never a topic that was not discussed. Although for a young teenage boy, he didn't want it openly discussed all the time, might I say. But it was never hidden for us. But I think also culturally, there's certain cultural groups where there's a lot of myths and misunderstandings about, it's the fault. It could be the fault of the parents, did something wrong, something in a past life. And so within those circumstances, those people need a lot more support as well. If I was a single parent, it would have been a terrible struggle to be constantly having that, never a break, wondering when you were going to get that call, what were those messages. So I must say I was in a very privileged position.
And that was going to be my question to all of you. What do you think are some of those common myths about epilepsy? I can share some of the, the comments that people have said to me, but and I think for me, it's been that misunderstanding of what it actually is and what it involves. But what do you see, Lisa and your clientele, and Tracy with your son, and Graham, as a CEO as well? What are the common things that people misunderstand, or those myths about epilepsy?
Well, I think there's some things that are kind of worldwide issues, which are, possession by the devils, are a very common one. There's a range, that's sort of the thing that sort of that Tracy mentioned about, this is some sort of retribution for sins of the parents is another one. And I think all of those things are, just resulting from a real lack of understanding about epilepsy as a medical condition, where you've just got a sort of a misfiring, electrical misfiring in the brain, and there's many reasons for it. I think the other common misconception is that epilepsy is all about the tonic, clonic sort of convulsion type seizure, where I think that's basically about 40% of seizures have that convulsive nature, and the majority don't. So that's another very common misconception. Lisa can perhaps expand.
Oh, well, there are many stories of people who have what are called focal seizures. So there are two main groups of seizures. There are what broadly are called generalized seizures, where this abnormal electrical activity, which is the seizure that disrupts normal functioning briefly, occurs right across the brain. But there are focal seizures where the abnormal discharge is located to one part of the brain, and what someone might witness and the person might experience having the seizure very much depends on what function that part of the brain controls. Now, some people who have focal seizures, what we call now focal impaired awareness seizures, can behave in all sorts of ways that can be misconstrued. They can be mistakenly thought to be drug affected, alcohol affected, disturbed from a mental health perspective. And we've had numerous clients who've been arrested, have been charged.
Really? Wow.
And there are numerous stories. There are countless stories. One of the big areas of need, we think, the many areas of need, is really to even educate paramedics about the broader range of seizures, because someone having, it's not uncommon for someone having a focal impaired awareness seizure, that if they're restrained, they can resist. They're not aware that they're doing that. So there's instances where people think they're doing the right thing by trying to restrain the person during a seizure. and the person can become incredibly upset, sometimes even aggressive, and have no recollection of that afterwards. So the situation can escalate out of control. So there's lots of situations like that where misunderstanding causes real distress in people's lives.
I suppose that's why it's really important to have Epilepsy Awareness Month that we're in, and to have these sort of sessions where we're really unpacking and getting to understand deeper the whole issues around epilepsy. And Kelly, you've had epilepsy yourself, and so tell us a bit about your story.
Well, mine's an interesting one, as the neurologists tell me, 1 out of 200,000. I think that's the stats for mine. So I was 27, and I'd been in the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand. So that was the first thing, and had come out of a building that had, they weren't sure if I'd been hit on the head, but, with falling bricks and things. Was transferred to Auckland, and I started to get some headaches and nausea, and tried everything from diet change to, all sorts of headache medication and everything. And it got to the stage where I was getting nauseous every single day, couldn't keep it under control. And the GPs, no scans done, no nothing. I went home from work sick on the Friday afternoon, feeling like really, really like throbbing headaches, and they just thought maybe it's a migraine. And I still remember that Saturday morning, was said to my friend, right, I'm going to go for a run. Do you want to come for a run with me? And she said, oh, no, I'm all good. I'll see you when you get back, and let's have a glass of wine and nibbles. Okay, that was good. Met a friend for a run, and I said to her, I'm not feeling so good, Vic. I'm not feeling so good. And apparently that was it. I had a big seizure. Don't even remember anything at all. I passed out. So originally I was don't remember anything. I was taken to hospital, and they said, right, she's got epilepsy. We'll put her straight onto Keppra, discharged, away we go. That was it. So I started on my Keppra, and I remember thinking, I don't really remember it, to be honest. I remember, like you were saying, Lisa, people said I was a bit out of it, a bit drowsy, not my normal self, so to speak. And then I went away for Easter and came home, and I had another large seizure, and still don't remember any of that. Apparently I had a headache, I lost control, vomited, don't remember anything, and a lumbar puncture, and I was found to have a brain tumor. And so they removed the big tennis ball out of my head, and that was successful, 3 operations. But to this day I've just had controlled. So the neurologist, I have an MRI now every 2 years, and it's fully controlled. But I remember even back then, my biggest challenge, and I can totally relate to your son, Tracy, is not being able to drive. So my thinking was, my biggest challenge was the social. And like you were saying, Graham, I was judged very heavily at work. I was practicing accredited allied health, and I lost my registration, and I had to reset that. I had to have a neurological assessment, 8 hours. I passed above average, but I had to, to show my fitness to work, which had no, issues. And it was the simple things. It was the fact not being able to drive for a year because I had uncontrolled seizures, and getting my medication right. And now, 8 years down the track, I didn't even think about, I take my Keppra morning and night, and I just get on with my life. I still had to have my MRIs, and all, like you said, Lisa, as well, having a great GP where they've said, right, when you're going to have children and things, you need to be, planning for that. And it's all these things that you don't even think about, that you've got to be thinking about on every sense. So at one stage, you just, you're having your medication morning and night, you have your MRI, you get on with it. But it's all those other long-term things that you don't think about or take into account as well. And it's also that life experience that you can really resonate, as a support care worker like yourself, Lisa, or at Tracy and Graham, working in those foundations where you can really have that empathy for other people, because you've had that personal experience. So
thanks, Cal, for sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm sure the listeners do as well. And Graham, so a case like Kelly's, how does the foundation support people like Kelly and other people that have got epilepsy and are struggling with the whole thing?
Yeah, so I think, we operate at 3 levels. In terms of support for people. So someone like Kelly with a diagnosis, would ring someone like Lisa and talk about a diagnosis and what are the implications, what are the options, what are the questions you have that weren't answered by the medical practitioners. Get support developing an epilepsy management plan. If there was emergency medication prescribed for you, then we'd help you with the emergency medication management plan, and then we'd potentially go into your workplace and train the other staff in your workplace about epilepsy, about your particular epilepsy, about your management plan, how you want to be supported if you have a seizure, what if any adjustments needed to be made in terms of your workplace. Some people might need to rest after 3 hours of screen work or something to avoid having a seizure. So we might have to talk to the workplace about changing some of the way you work, those sorts of things. And then we work, because we work to raise awareness in the community and help understanding, so that you don't have to fear disclosing that you have epilepsy, that you'll be understood better in all sorts of settings. We also work to educate people like first responders, and we work with the medical practitioners to make sure there's good referral processes between the diagnosing doctors and people getting referred to us. A lot of people don't know that the Epilepsy Foundation exists, and I think we're certainly now, as part of our Epilepsy Smart Australia program, we've got some funding from the federal government to really lift the whole game to a nationally consistent approach in Australia. And we'll be starting to do a whole lot more marketing of the Epilepsy Foundation and our partners in the other states with our Epilepsy Smart Australia program, to really make sure that everybody that needs the support and needs to get more information about their epilepsy and have people around them trained is going to happen. We're really excited about that.
Fantastic. Now, we've got a comment here from Esther. Lisa, I'm going to need some of your advice here, because this looks a pretty smart lady, this one. Epilepsy isn't uncommon in dogs either. Most causes are unknown, are managed by on Keeper 2. Just for information, we're all about awareness. So, okay, we're not just treating people, we're treating pets. And any comment about that, Lisa?
Well, there's no doubt that epilepsy is not uncommon amongst dogs, and probably other animals too. But dogs we tend to think of, or we hear more about. But it's not surprising. I mean, they've got brains. They've got so the potential is there for seizures, and it happens. And yes, often the medications that are used to treat epilepsy in humans are used in animals as well. So
absolutely.
I wonder, Kelly, whether the dogs are a bit smarter than the cats, because you don't hear much in cats. What do you think about that, Kelly?
Smaller brains.
Well, no, ironically, I had a dog as well. His name was Ted, and he had epilepsy. Yep.
Did he?
And
Yeah,
and he was quite comfortable. I remember I would give him half a Keppra. Thank you, Esther. And I would give him some omega-3. He would get dermatitis for his skin and everything. But his became very controlled, and we were able to wean him off it. So there you go.
Yeah. Interesting.
So a lot of research into epilepsy is done on mice, because their brain functions very similar to humans. So I think any mammal can have seizures.
Okay, well, we want to keep those questions and comments going. Thank you very much, Esther. Really good to hear. Now, Graham, what's happening on the international front, mate? Because obviously we're pretty privileged here in Australia, but some of the poorer countries in the world where they don't have the money or the research, or they don't have a great foundation like you guys, like we do in Australia. What's going on internationally for you?
So some of the significant things is that epilepsy is now being recognised by the World Health Organization as a global issue to be worked on. So global health priority. So that's been pretty exciting stuff on the international front. What's happening? I work with both the International League Against Epilepsy, which is all the medical practitioners. And I also, as I said, I'm on the board of the International Bureau for Epilepsy, which is made up of all the community service type organisations around the world. So what we're doing internationally is trying to take all the best sort of practices from around the world and make sure they're available to all the organisations so that we can build the capacity of organisations. Certainly in third world countries, there's some big issues for people with epilepsy. They don't necessarily have access to doctors. They don't have access to the drugs, and they don't have access to any of the support organisations. So, we're working on that international level to do the best that we can to raise awareness and support for people in third world countries, because I think you've heard the story from Tracy about the impact on the lives of someone with epilepsy, and Melbourne's probably one of the best places in the world to have a diagnosis of epilepsy in terms of the support available. But just imagine that sort of issue, in a third world country where potentially you couldn't get access to drugs to treat the epilepsy. That's slowly improving, but there's a long way to go.
I would also say, Graham, from my personal experience, I remember the neurologist saying to me in New Zealand and the Pacific are a lot smaller than Australia, and the services very, very limited. Only having neurology services in Auckland and where they could do those operations. My second port of call would have been to come to Melbourne or Sydney. So can definitely reflect on that. I was going to ask you, Tracy, in terms of youth, what did you find? What would your son be saying to adolescents and youth now who are diagnosed with epilepsy, or like myself, wasn't sure what it was, and I didn't have any idea at all?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is, for the youth is to provide them with accurate information, so they're fully armed about what it is, what is the condition that they have and what it means. I think not to hide anything, have everything on the table. And I think one of the biggest, for my son who has what's called idiopathic generalized epilepsy with tonic clonic seizures, that's a mouthful. So idiopathic means we don't know what causes it. Generalized means that his whole brain is affected. It's not a focal one part of the brain. And tonic clonic seizures is what some people remember as grand mal seizures, and we call them tonic clonic seizures now. And for him, lifestyle plays a huge factor. So things like lack of sleep, stress, alcohol, other drugs. Now, they're kind of all things that are part of a youth's life, right? Or they're exposed to. Yeah. So the challenge is, how do you become part of your peer group with also managing those risk factors that can lead to a seizure? And I must say that now Hamish is 26, he's got his own stride now, although he does push the boundaries sometimes. But, he doesn't, it's not so much about peer acceptance, but he went through an incredibly challenging time where he was like, why should I not be like everybody else? So that's a really serious conversation, that there is some control you can get. There's medication, remembering to take your medication on time. That's another huge, big risk factor. But that's a learning process. And I think, there's no blame to be had if, sometimes there's a seizure for no reason at all. but to accept that, not to blame themselves, but to understand there are things that they can do to help keep those seizures under control.
Yeah. Lisa, I had a case of a young boy that had a lot of seizures, and they didn't know why he was having all these seizures, but I think it ended up being a bit of brain damage. And a kid that was going really nicely in school, doing really well with his friends, his family, after these seizures and the brain damage, completely turned around, became angry, got suspended from school, couldn't live with one of the parents, couldn't live with both of the parents, and has started life down a very negative life. I mean, do you have cases like that? I mean, it can become, quite negative or quite harmful for the young person, the family, and it's very hard to know how to manage when brain gets damaged through these seizures.
Well, so there's a lot to unpack there, Mark.
Yeah.
You're suggesting...
Imagine how the family's feeling. I mean, the family's devastated.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's difficult. It's incredibly challenging for a lot of people, particularly where seizures are so disruptive and the person's life has changed so dramatically, and the family. But we've got to be careful we've got to be very careful to convey to people that in the vast majority of instances, recurrent seizures don't necessarily cause brain damage, right? So without knowing more information, I can't be absolutely certain that the seizures have actually caused the brain damage. Was there some underlying... People can be born with what you would generically call little scars in your brain, or what would be more accurately called a dysplasia, for example, and be coasting along quite well for many, many years, and perhaps in their adolescence or their 20s start having seizures, often starting with very tiny focal seizures, and they often don't get diagnosed until they have a major tonic-clonic seizure and end up in hospital and are investigated, have an MRI scan, and they find some damage there. And this can happen, for example, febrile seizures in little kids are very, very common, and the vast majority of those kids grow out of them and don't go on to develop epilepsy and are fine. But a small percentage have some damage done, particularly in their temporal lobes, and may later on in life develop epilepsy. And so I think there's a lot to unpack in what you're saying, but there's no doubt that it's particularly challenging for adolescents when they're diagnosed with epilepsy. It's unbelievably disruptive, and it's very hard for them to understand. As Tracy explained beautifully, Hamish, it sounds as though Hamish went through a phase of almost anger, because why did it have to happen to him? And the reality is it takes some people much longer to learn. Some kids go down a path of self-destruction and almost try to be in a perpetual state of denial that they've got this condition. And it's particularly difficult if they have major tonic-clonic seizures, because they are incredibly risky, those seizures. They are very, very risky seizures, because they often happen abruptly without warning, and the person's unconscious, and could be swimming, could be driving, could be at heights, could be in all sorts of difficult circumstances. So it's really difficult. And in a situation like that, the parents, the more controlling parents are, doesn't necessarily help. It's a fine line to try and sort of provide information and support and encouragement to your adolescent child, and give them some avenues of getting some independent help outside the family. That's a reliable, like our service, for example, where they can talk about what's going on if they feel comfortable. And we do sometimes get calls from adolescents, and sometimes they won't. They don't want to disclose their name. They want to be completely anonymous. So that can be helpful, but sometimes it's a waiting game. But the more parents try and control, particularly as the adolescent gets older, the less successful, it's unlikely to be helpful. So it's difficult. So trying to get some outside help sometimes makes a difference. But, one of the biggest incentives is most young people want to get their licence. They want to get their learner permit. They want to be able to drive. And particularly for those young people who've got a really treatable form of epilepsy, but they're completely non-compliant. They're not taking their medication. And after all, the medication doesn't cure whatever's caused their epilepsy. They need a steady amount of it in their body at any given time to try and suppress seizures from happening. It's like a preventative. And lifestyle issues, as Tracy said, are huge. Lack of sleep. Sleep deprivation is a massive trigger factor. Significant intake of alcohol. Alcohol lowers a person's seizure threshold. It interacts with their anti-seizure medication, and their medication's less effective. So, it's getting on top of those lifestyle, and it takes some people much longer than others. But the incentive of trying to get things under control to get a driving license is often the big carrot that works.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. So for all our listeners out there, what would you say the signs to look out for those of us who have never seen someone have a seizure before, or for some of us who have never experienced one? What would be those signs to be aware of?
Well, I think if you're down the street and you see someone having a tonic clonic seizure, there's likely to be a lot of drama and a lot of distressed people, but there's almost inevitably going to be someone, particularly if it's in public, who will know what to do, who may have witnessed one of these seizures. And one of the key things is try to avoid panicking. Don't restrain the person. Get them in the recovery position as soon as possible and tilt their chin up slightly, because protecting their airway for someone who's unconscious is absolutely vital. And protect the person but avoid restraint. Allow the seizure to run its course, time the seizure. And, of course, if it's in public and you don't know the person, get someone to call an ambulance. Call 000 and the operator will go through the routine and the protocols and gain all the relevant information. Some people choose to wear some sort of medical ID, others don't. But really, there's almost always someone around who knows what to do in that instance. What's more challenging often is when someone has a focal seizure and they may have a focal impaired awareness. They might be doing unusual repetitive behaviours like sort of fiddling with clothing, turning in circles, saying things that make absolutely no sense. And that is a much more difficult seizure to recognise, for people in the community to recognise. So I would hope a good citizen would stay with that person, try and get some help. I think if you don't know the person and you can clearly see that someone's behaving in a way that is unexpected, call 000, stay with them. Try and be reassuring and talk to the person gently. And if they're having a focal impaired awareness seizure and they're in danger, gently guide them away from the danger if you can by gently touching their elbow. Don't grab, unless they're in absolutely immediate danger of serious harm, do not sort of grab them, manhandle them and try and
or put something in their mouth.
Yeah, or never put something in someone's mouth, which is a common thing people do. You can't swallow your tongue. Please, let's emphasise your tongue is a muscle, and yes, when you are unconscious, you lose control. That's why people are put in the recovery position.
A lot of great advice there, Lisa. Fantastic. Now, Graham, we're coming to the end of the show, but now the Epilepsy Foundation, how do we support you there, Graham, running this great foundation, this great service? What sort of stuff can we do to support you?
Yeah, so, there's people can go to our website, epilepsyfoundation.org.au, and there's opportunities there, for how you can support us. Obviously, we rely on donations to, do a range of things, and some of our new initiatives are around funding research to try and cure epilepsy. So people can get involved in that way. They can also get involved as volunteers in our op shops.
Yeah.
And certainly we've found with the COVID situation that a number of volunteers are not wishing to continue volunteering and meeting public at the moment. So we'd love some more volunteers that are fully vaccinated to come and help in our op shop. So,
what's your website there, Graham? What's the website that people can get in touch with you on?
Yeah, epilepsyfoundation.org.au.
Fantastic.
And I think if people are wanting to call up and get support from us, they can dial 1300 761 487 and get through to our information and support line. So that's 1300 761 487.
Thanks very much, Graham. Now, I've got a question for you, Tracy. Mike has asked a question. I think this is a good one for yourself. We'll see if our back of house can get that question up on the screen, Julio. Mike Bax, what's the best advice you would give to parents who have just received a diagnosis if they're an infant child? So what would you be saying there, Tracy?
I think it's the same advice as that I gave earlier. Is first of all is that to connect with a really good GP who you have constant connection to. Get in touch with the Epilepsy Foundation for more information and support. Make sure also what you read is valid information. Don't go down a rabbit hole on the internet with information that might not be validated research papers. Always head to either the International Epilepsy Organisations or the Epilepsy Foundation itself. And also to get the support from your family if you do have family that can rally around and support you, and that depending on the seizures that the infant is having, that if there needs to be fairly constant vigilance, you find ways to get a break. And because what I learned along the journey is looking after yourself is just as important as looking after your child, because it doesn't help if everyone's not doing well.
Yes.
Well, it's been a big show, and just want to thank our amazing guests. And we just want to finish off. It's Epilepsy Month here on 98.9 Northwest FM, and obviously out in the community. We want to bring you the information tonight. We're just going to end with some comments that our panel and Kelly wants to make to you as we sort of close the show off. Just some closing comments about epilepsy, especially in mind about this awareness stuff. Kelly, what would be your closing comments to people listening to the show?
I love the advice that everyone said tonight, but I think one thing that really stuck out for me is just that lifestyle, that lifestyle change, no matter where you are, whether you're at youth, whether you're at work, no matter where you're at, just to really focus on that, to be aware of your sleep and those patterns, and just to have that good support network around you. So that would be my advice and my biggest takeaway. And to not have that, like Graham said, that stigma attached to you, so say it may be in any setting, so that you can actually have that support. People can actually be aware of what actually epilepsy is. I think it's very
great. Lisa, what's your comment you want to leave us with?
Oh, so many, but I think I'd encourage people to don't isolate yourself. It actually only exacerbates the problem if you choose to isolate yourself. So develop that sort of network of trusted supports, whether it's some family, some friends. I think that's absolutely vital, because there's no doubt there's a higher incidence of anxiety and depression amongst people with epilepsy. It's not just about the seizures. It's much, much bigger than that.
Thank you. We just got another comment here, Julio, from Augustine. This is just so much informative. Thanks for inviting me, Kelly. Thanks to you all. Well, great. I'm glad you found it helpful. I've found it really helpful. I've learned a lot tonight. And so, Tracy, what would you want to say to us? You've sort of got that hands-on experience. You've navigated amazingly. What do you want to tell us?
I don't know about that. There's certainly been some good times and some bad times. But look, I think from the outset, I think talking about it was my number one thing. It's like having diabetes or a heart problem or anything. Like there should be no stigma. And also just be careful, I think, as a parent, everybody's got some advice. Haven't you tried this? Why haven't you done that? it's like when your child doesn't sleep. Everybody knows how, you should be getting your child to sleep. Please don't listen, or just say thank you for that. Don't take on board other people's maybe misinformation, misconceptions, or trying to put onto you that maybe you're not doing a good enough job taking care of your child, and that's why they continue to have seizures. So block that out. That's a big one for me.
Fantastic. And
Good advice.
Graham, how do you want to leave us, mate? What would be your message?
I think one of our bike catchphrases, if you like, is no one should go it alone with their epilepsy. So I really encourage people to get in touch with us. All the information we provide is researched, it's evidence-based, and if you've got new forms, something particular around epilepsy that we don't currently have information on, we'll go and research the world and find information out for you and get back to you.
Brilliant.
Well, fantastic. I might get Julio to put that website and phone number back up. And don't forget, you've got a few spare dollars. I'm sure the Epilepsy Foundation would love to gain your contribution. But also I heard there they also would love to be a volunteer. They need a few more volunteers. And I'm going to see if I can get Kelly roped in to go to the op shop. So I reckon Kelly would be good selling stuff at the op shop. How you think you would go there? And we've just got another couple of comments, Julio, there. These shows are great, informative, tuning while in the shed. Okay, fantastic, while in the shed. And Milton, another great show. Yeah, I agree with you, Milton. Fantastic show. And I think I've nearly signed Kelly to go up to the op shop. So quickly, Graham, how does someone join? Because I think they want to join Kelly. She's very popular on the show. So how do people sign up to volunteer at your op shop?
Yeah, just go to that epilepsyfoundation.org.au and there's a section on how you can help. And there'll be information on how to volunteer in the op shops on the website.
Okay, well, thanks, Lisa, Tracy, Graham. Thanks for coming. And Kelly, thanks for organising it and
you.
sharing your
Thank
story
you
as well, Kel. And Julio Backerhouse, thanks, buddy. 98.9 Northwest FM. It's Community Heart Radio, another show on epilepsy during Epilepsy Awareness Month. So thanks for joining us tonight. And we're going to go back to our normal program now.